Today we're going to take a look at section 13.4, the costs and advantage of home ownership. There's several different things we're going to take a look at. The first is just some language talking about these items requires that we have a firm understanding of what we're discussing with the language. The first term is a mortgage, and a mortgage is simply a home loan for a substantial amount over a lengthy time interval. Sometimes this is called a deed of trust or a security deed. So this is the loan for a house or a condo or whatever kind of property we're talking about as a mortgage. A down payment is the portion of the purchase price that the buyer pays when they close on the house. So when they actually take possession of the house and get to move in and whatever, and they are the quote-unquote owners of the house, the down payment is the portion that they paid at that time. A term is the time length that you will take to pay off the loan, at least your intended time length at the beginning of this situation. So the most common terms are either 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, or 30 years. You do see some unusual things other than that, but those are the typical ones. Probably most typical are the 15 or the 30. You see some 20s, but pretty much 15s and 30s. The principal amount of the mortgage is actually the amount of the loan. So you find this amount by taking the purchase price and you subtract off the down payment. So this is the amount that you're actually borrowing for this piece of property. Your fixed mortgage rate, fixed rate mortgage is a mortgage, right, a loan on a house, where the rate stays fixed. So it doesn't change at any point during the loan. It is a constant rate. It will always be 4% or whatever unless you go through and restructure your loan. Amateurizing is the process by which the initial principal balance, together with the interest due on the loan, is repaid to the lender through regular, constant, periodic, typically monthly, sometimes you'll see some weekly or bi-weekly kind of arrangements, but typically monthly payments. And we're going to do an example of amateurization today as well. All right, our regular monthly payment is the payment that we would be required to pay on the loan each month. It includes both the amount of interest to that point and part of the principal payment to that point, and it's found by taking the principal times the rate over 12, and of course that rate is a percent changed into a decimal, so we want the decimal expression in terms of R, or within where R is, and then over 1 minus 12 over 12 plus that same rate, raised to the 12t, and remember t again is always in years. All right, our closing costs or our settlement charges are imposed when the loan is finalized, i.e. at closing. So you'll have a down payment portion. You may have fees to realtors. You may have part of your interest payment in advance or part of your property taxes in advance. We'll talk about those two components later. There may be fees to the title company. There's all kinds of different fees that are charged, and these are called closing costs or settlement charges. We're going to take an example, and you will recognize the characters in our example. We've been working with them frequently in Chapter 13. We have Ann and Andy, and Ann and Andy decide that they are ready to buy a house. They find the perfect house. Got a typo here. I don't know why that says DVD. They find the perfect house. They negotiate with their realtor for a purchase price of $120,000. And they qualify at the credit union for a $100,000 fixed rate loan. Oh, I've got a couple of typos. With a 3.75 interest rate on a 20-year schedule. So their term is 20 years. They are going to have a $100,000 loan. The house that they're buying is worth $120,000, or they're paying $120,000 for it. And we're going to take a look at some questions. And the interest rate was 3.75%. Our first question is, what down payment must they come up with for the home at closing? So sometimes down payments have to do with percentages. For instance, the lending institution may want you to pay a 10% down payment, or a 20% down payment, or a 30% down payment. So you would take the purchase price and you'd multiply it by that percent. In this situation, we've got something a little bit different going on. We've got Ann and Andy. They want to purchase a $120,000 house, but they are only going to be able to loan $100,000 of that. So this one's not a percentage issue at all. It's simply that they have to come up with the part that they're not going to be allowed to loan. So we would take the $120,000 that the house costs, And we would subtract off the $100,000 that they are able to loan out, which means at minimum they would have to come up with $20,000 for their down payment. Right, so they could come up with more, obviously, and take a lesser loan, but this is what they are going to be shooting for at a minimum. Part B says what will be their monthly payment in order to amateurize the principal and interest. So we had a formula for this. This is R equals. We have P, that's the amount of the principal of the mortgage, that's my $100,000. We have our interest rate, which is 0.0375 divided by 12. And then all of this is divided by 1 minus 12 over, and I'm going to take 12 and add it to 0.0375, so this is 12.0375. And that portion, that fraction, is raised to the 12 times 20, and again we want to be cautious with the use of our calculator to assist us with these calculations, and so we probably would just write this exponent as 240 so that we don't end up having a parenthesis issue in the calculator. If you simplify that denominator, you will end up getting, and the numerator respectively, on the top you end up getting 312.50, and then on the bottom you end up getting 0.527080720 01. And word of caution again, do not round early. We round at the very end because this is a monthly payment amount. We'll have 2 decimals here in a moment. We do not round until we get to the end. At the end we find out that this division will give us $592.89. All right, another example then. We're taking a look. One word of advice, if you will, or a comment to make. So you might be looking at this and saying, okay, but I mean, wouldn't it kind of be nice to have a longer note because I'll have a lesser payment? And there is some truth to that. But the other component is you don't want to be in debt forever for your house. And so a conservative estimate, and by conservative here I don't mean conservative versus liberal, I mean conservative as in conservative with your money, so a frugal or a cautious estimate for home ownership would be to take a 15-year fixed rate mortgage with a 20% or more down payment that will cost you no more than 25% of your take-home pay. And the issue is that the lending institution will let you lend more than this. If you go in and you make $2,000 take-home pay in a month, they will loan you very close to the same amount that you would need to make a $1,000 house payment. The issue is that you are only going to have half of your take-home pay to live on, to make any kind of other loan payments, to save for any kind of vacations or college planning or future future changes in your status, like maybe you're trying to move across the country or something like that. You're going to be very limited in what you're able to do because so much of your money is going to be going into this home. And there's a phrase for that that's called house poor, when people have too much of their income going into their home. So this isn't sort of a concrete thing. It's a very idyllic thing, but it is the idea that will keep you safe, or keep you safest. Safer, I should even say. So having something that's longer than 15 years just prolongs how long you're in debt. Having something that gives you less of a mortgage payment than 20%, well, you'll see in a moment here, it means that your mortgage is not paying off very quickly, and you end up owing a lot of money potentially at the point when you might be interested in selling your property. You might end up in a fix that you didn't intend. And then we've already addressed the issue of not having more than 25% of your take-home pay. All right, so let's actually take a look at a amortization schedule. We're only going to look at a very brief section. So if you take a look back at Ann and Andy, they have a 20-year note. They're going to make 12 monthly payments every year, right? 12 payments. And if you take 20 times 12, you'll find out that that means that if they pay this mortgage exactly as prescribed at closing, they're going to make 240 payments. So this is an amortization schedule for the first 2 payments. We're not going to show all 240 payments because that would just take us quite a while. So we're going to see how that works, though, and kind of make some observations about this process. So the first issue is we're going to have the first month's payment, we're going to have our second month's payment. And our payment amount we just found on the previous problem. It is and won't change unless we change our mortgage terms, like refinance, $592.89. Now comes the more interesting part. It has to do with the interest payment. So we're going to start with month 1. So in our first month, we have to find our interest, and we've already had an interest formula that we've used before, I equals PRT, which is exactly the interest formula we're using now. P is the principal, so at the beginning of this loan we have a $100,000 loan. We have an interest rate of 0.0375, and we have a time length of 1/12, okay, because this is a monthly payment, 1 month out of the year. Time, again, is always in years. And if we multiply this out, we will get $312.50. So my first interest payment is $312.50, which means my principal payment would be the amount of my payment, $592.89, minus the amount that's going towards interest, which was $280.39. I'm sorry, $312.50. I apologize, I wrote that down wrong. And that equals the number that I was just trying to write, which is the $280.39. So the very first month of my mortgage, I have more of my money going towards the interest, which is my sort of fee to the lending institution, than is actually paying off the loan. Slightly more, but still more of my payment is going towards paying off the credit union or the bank for the luxury or the opportunity to make this loan, rather than actually paying off the loan. Now the balance principal then is our new balance at this point, takes my $100,000 and it takes off the principal amount, which was $280.39, the amount that was applied towards my principal, and I'm left with $99,719.60. 61, there we go. I'll fill this into my table. So I still owe $99,719.60 on my loan. Alright, so let's take a look at month 2. So on month 2, we still are making the same payment, $592.89. So it doesn't sort of feel any different to us as the borrower. But a little bit different things are happening. So my interest this time, found the same way, takes the principal, which is no longer $100,000, it's actually $99,719.61 now, the same amount, and it multiplies it by the interest rate, 0.0375, and again the amount of time is 1/12 of a year, since it's number of months, or since my is in months, it's 1 month, and this ends up being $311.62. So my interest payment the second month is $311.62. And if I want to find my principal payment, it's PAL, I'll type up here too. My principal payment is found by taking my $592.89 and taking off my $311.62. And if I take that off, I will get, oops, let me write it over here. I will get that the amount of my principal this month going towards my principal is $281.27. All right, $281.27. All right, so then, again, we're going to do the last piece, which is the balance on the account. So the balance on the account would be taking that $99,719.61 and taking off the principal payment that we just made, which was $281.27, and we would be left with $99,438. I'm running out of space. 34. Let me see if I can scoot that over just a little bit. All right, and that will go in my last box back on my previous slide. $99,438.34. So after the first 2 months of this mortgage, you should notice a couple of things. First, you should notice that the total payment stays the same. Okay, so your payment amount is not changing, but your interest payment changes each time. In fact, your interest is slightly less than it was the month before, and the reason is because you owe slightly less money on the house than you did the month before. And since the interest payment is slightly less, the principal payment is slightly more. And of course, your balance is going down, but you might also notice that you've paid almost $1,200 to live in this house. And over here underneath your balance of principal, you can see that you've really only paid $600 towards the value of the house, even though you've paid about $1,200 in monthly payments to live at the house. So a couple things you'll sometimes hear is you'll hear people say things like, it's cheaper to buy than it is to rent. And what they're talking about generally is they're talking about this total payment amount. So for instance, let's say that you were looking at this $120,000 home and you were trying to decide, do I want to buy it or do I want to rent it? And maybe for some reason you have an option. And sometimes you do. Maybe they're two very similar homes, one's for purchase and one's for rent. And so in one situation, you look at these numbers and you say, but it's only going to cost me about $600 a month if I buy the house. Okay? And then you look at the mortgage or the rental amount that the person is wanting to rent the property to you at, and you see that it's going to cost you $700 to rent it, and you say, well, why would I want to pay $700 to rent the house when I can buy the house and pay only $600? And the problem comes in with you not considering some of the other factors in home ownership costs. So let's take a look at our next slide. There are 3 other pieces of information that can affect home ownership, and there's others as well, but these are the 3 biggies. The first one is property taxes. So perhaps you weren't aware, but you actually have to pay taxes if you own a piece of property. Not just at the time you buy the property, but every year that you own the property. Property taxes are collected by a county or other local government, and they can cost up to several $1,000s a year. However, one of the sort of selling points to consumers is the fact that the property tax and the mortgage interest, hang on, let me get the right word in here. It's the mortgage interest, not the mortgage itself, but the interest are tax deductible. All right, so that's one of them. The other one is the homeowner's insurance. So a homeowner's policy will cover loss due to things like fire, storm damage, and other casualties. So tornadoes almost always included in that, which is really good considering where we live. Some things are not included in that. So there's certain places where flooding is a separate policy. If there was a flood, it wouldn't cover if you had a flood. Earthquake insurance, typically a different policy for that. Hail damage is included, which is really good. In Oklahoma as well, we get hail damage from time to time, and replacing roofs can be very expensive. The other thing that people don't consider that is also of value is that it provides liability coverage if someone is hurt on your property. So if you drive a car, you may be aware that you're required to carry liability insurance on your car. What that does is it actually protects you in the case that if you ran into somebody and they got hurt and they had medical bills, instead of you being responsible for their medical bills because you were the one who was the cause of the accident, your insurance is responsible for the medical bills for that other person. So it's not money that's actually for you, but it's money there that's to protect you. And that's exactly what the homeowner's liability does too. So if somebody were to get hurt on your property, so maybe 10 years from now you have a 5-year-old son and he's jumping on the trampoline with his best buddy from down the street and the best buddy falls off and breaks his leg. Well, depending on Best Buddy's mom or dad, Best Buddy's mom or dad may decide that they want you to pay for those medical bills. And if they do, your homeowner's insurance will cover the cost of those medical bills. It's not you that's responsible. It also does some strange things. So you've all heard the weird cases where somebody breaks into your house and your dog bites them, and somehow they think that they should be able to sue you because your dog bit them when they broke into your house. Well, they can sue you, and they may win, which is just crazy, but the reality is you want to make sure that you're not responsible for that cost if they do. And you're not. Your homeowner's insurance liability coverage would be paying for that. And so having good liability coverage on homeowner's insurance is important. The other issue to stake here, and I just want to insert this at this point, is that you may think, okay, well, I don't have a home, so I don't need homeowner's insurance. Well, that's sort of true. You don't actually need what we would typically call homeowner's insurance, but it's the same kind of policy. It's just a policy for a non-homeowner living somewhere, as in a renter's insurance. Renter's insurance is dirt cheap. I remember the first renter's policy that we had, flat out cost us $13 a month. I know, very pricey, $13 a month. And what it did was it would cover the property in the house. So ours was an apartment. If there had been a huge fire that consumed the apartment building, the landowners, the property owners would actually have coverage for the dwelling itself, but their insurance coverage would not pay to replace my personal items. I have to have insurance to pay to replace my personal items that are in that place where I'm living. So that's a renter's insurance policy. You may be aware that there were fires that went through Oklahoma this past summer. Those fires damaged lots of homes. They destroyed, completely annihilated many homes. In fact, one of the young ladies at our church lived in one of those homes out in kind of the country area that was it was burned up completely, basically, in the fire. Problem is, it wasn't her home, and she didn't have renter's insurance, so she lost everything that she did not take out of that home when she left. And that was pretty much everything. And she has no recourse. She has no possibility of getting back because she did not take the steps necessary to have that policy in place beforehand. All right, enough of that. One third thing that's a biggie is maintenance. Depending on the age of the home, how it's constructed, its size, its condition, you may have maintenance fees too. And I don't mean just like, oh, I have to mow the lawn, although there is that. But, if the dishwasher breaks, you're responsible for it. It's not the renter, the landowner that's responsible for it. It's not your landlord. It's you. If, the heat and air goes out, heaven forbid, which is a very costly replacement, or can be, it's all up to you to replace or fix those features that go wrong. And then, of course, typically it's also up to you to take care of the lawn and things like that, or perhaps you have to pay a homeowners association that takes care of some of your maintenance of the outside of your home. Again, another fee that would be on top of your actual mortgage payment. So let's take a look at an example. It won't involve maintenance because that can vary so much, but it will involve seeing how your taxes and your insurance affect your monthly payment amount, like actually how much it costs you to live in this home. All right, so we're going to take the total monthly payment, find the total monthly payment for Ann and Andy. And Ann and Andy have three things that are always affecting their monthly payment. The first thing is their regular mortgage amount. How much they pay in the regular mortgage amount. That was the $592.89 we found before. We also have the cost for their insurance, and we have the cost for their taxes. And it affects all three. So your regular monthly payment was $592.89. Our insurance in this case was $660, but that's $660 annually, right? So we need the monthly interest because we're looking at a monthly payment. So we're going to take 660 and divide by 12. And we're going to do the same thing with our taxes. Our taxes are given in an annual amount up here. So we're going to take 932 and divide that also by 12. And if we take each of these, let me see, I've got 592.89. The 660 over 12 is actually an even $55. And then the 932 over 12, we'll have to round to two decimal places, is 77.67. And then you can see that we actually have a payment of $725.56. And so what it really costs them, and this doesn't even include maintenance, is it actually costs them, by owning a home, it costs them $725.56. Remember my example earlier where I said that this home, you can buy it for $592.89 a month, or you can rent it for $700 a month, and it sounds like, well, I should just buy it because it costs less. Well, just in how we're describing this particular aspect, and there's other aspects, but this particular aspect, it doesn't cost less. It actually costs you $725.56 to own the home versus renting the home. And then, of course, there's maintenance issues, and there's other sorts of issues that come into play too. All right, we're going to take a look at a couple other examples next time, but we're going to stop right there for today.